Hello everyone, in today's video I am going to show you how to fish small creeks and rivers with spinners for trout. In my hand here I have a collection with a bunch of spinners, all different varieties and brands. I'm going to introduce you to what I have, the different types, and when to use what type of spinner under what condition. So there are three things I'm going to talk about in this video. So the first one is the type of spinner and how to rig your line. The second one is where to locate the trout, where to actually use the spinners. And number three is how to fish using the spinners, like casting techniques and whatnot. If you watch the video and follow those three simple tricks that I show you guys, you should have a very good chance of catching a trout. The first thing I want to talk about is the gear and the rig. This is my spin rod with a Shakespeare reel. I'm using 10-pound braided line right now. For the actual rig itself, we're going to not just use braid the entire time. I'm going to show you the proper way. For the actual leader itself, we're going to use one of these swivels, and we're going to attach the swivel to our braid. I usually use what's called a clinch knot. It involves spinning the lure or the string around the line. So you can see I'm just wrapping it around. Usually 5 to 7 times is what's ideal. Just like that. And then all you gotta do is pull the end through the loop in the beginning and just pull it together. You're left with a very strong knot. Now you can see I have quite a bit of excess line from my knot, so I'm just going to cut that off and you'll be left with something like this. So now for the actual leader part, I always use clear line. There's a term for it, but I forget. I've always just known it as fishing line. Anyways, you want to use the fishing line for your leader instead of the braid, because the braid is a little easier for the fish to see, especially if you're using color like green or orange. So usually a leader can help disguise the bait a little bit more. For the leader, usually 18 inches is pretty good, so that's usually like 1.5 feet. Now I'll simply just tie the fishing line to the swivel. So now for the last step, we have the end of the leader here, and I'm going to put on a swivel with the clasp. Some guides just recommend just attaching the lure right to the end of the string, but I like to easily swap out my lures, so having the little clasp on here to easily swap out is very convenient. So I'll just tie this on. It's using the same knot. At this point, we have our braided line attached to a little swivel up here, and then at the very end we have our swivel with the clasp. Now is the time to actually start talking about the actual spinners themselves. So I have a box here with quite a bit of spinners. There are differences in the shapes of the spinners. Starting over here, this one's the smallest one, and it's more of like a cylinder or a torpedo, as some people call it. And these two in the middle are more of like a bell shape. And then the Meps is also more of a torpedo style. So this one's very small and light. You're going to use this to fish very shallow water. Something like the Blue Fox spinner. This is used to fish deeper water. You can tell it's a lot heavier, so it's going to sink a lot quicker. Same with the Meps. The biggest difference between the spinners are the sizes. Like this Meps Aglia spinner, they have different sizes. It's hard to see on the camera, but this is a size 1. This is a size 3. The difference in sizes, obviously the bigger the spinner, the bigger the fish you're gonna catch. Sizes 0 to 1 are about for fish, like about 6 inches long, and then usually size 2 to 3 you can get up to about 1 foot. Most of the fishing I do, I use sizes 2 or 3. So here's a size 2 spinner I picked out, Meps Aglia. And to actually attach this to my line, all I have to do is, I'll try to get a good view, open the little clasp by pressing on it. As you can see, it's open. Sometimes you have to pull on it a little bit to get it wider. Then you just put that on like that and make sure to close the clasp and you're good to go. One thing I forgot to mention for gear, I am wearing waders, as you could tell. Definitely not required to go trout fishing. You could easily find places like this and fish from the bank. I just wear them because it allows me to get to spots easier if I could just walk through the water instead of trying to, navigate through the woods or on bank. But definitely not required, although it is very useful. Okay, so now that we're all set up and ready to go, it's time to start fishing, right? Wrong. So let me explain. The next thing before you start going to fish is you actually need to find an ideal location to fish. You can see behind me right now, I am in a spot that is not ideal for catching trout. But basically, you don't want to be wasting your time fishing in spots that will produce no fish. It's always good to scout the water first and then find an ideal spot to fish there instead of wasting a bunch of time in a spot that cannot have any fish. So when we're looking for spots or we're fishing in general in streams or rivers, I usually always walk upstream. The current's flowing down this way, I walk up that way. And the reason for doing that is pretty simple. When you walk downstream, you're going to knock up a lot of debris and stuff, which is just muddy the water where you're trying to fish. And then I'll explain later in the video, but when you actually cast your line, you want to be casting upstream or parallel to the stream. So it's always easier when I'm fishing. I always know I want to start like downstream and then work my way upstream. So I walked the stream a little bit. You could tell it's a little bit different than it was earlier. Can you guys spot the difference? Well, if not, it's because unlike the other spot, this section of this creek has running water. Unlike lake fish, trout really love moving water. You really won't find them in still water or very slow moving water. They like the fast moving water in rapids because it brings them oxygen. It brings them lots of bugs that float down. Unless you were fishing for, say, lake trout, I would not recommend still water for trout. I just have not had very much luck there, and that's just not the spot where they hang out. While we're discussing rapids, one thing I want to make a note about is just because there's rapids and quicker moving water does not mean it's automatically a great spot. You can see here, the water is very shallow, probably about like 6 inches tops. I usually don't do well fishing really shallow areas like that. Okay, the next spot I'm going to talk about is cover. There's a nice submerged tree right there. Any fish, trout included, are going to look for places like this to hide from predators. All right, next spot I'm going to talk about is pools. Typically, when a fisherman describes a pool, what they're talking about is, you can see the rapids here. They flow down and they kind of stop around here, where it's significantly deeper. There's also a good deal of coverage right there under those sticks. So this is the third type of spot. This is a spot ideally where I like to fish because it has kind of combination of everything, like deeper water, rapids, and cover. I have seen a lot nicer pools in my life trout fishing. This one is not the best, but this river I am fishing today has kind of all been the same. So finding this is a nice spot. Now that we have found our spot, it is actually time to start fishing. So I'll give you guys a few pointers, a few tricks that I have learned that really help to fish with spinners. First one, this generally applies if you're using any lure or fly, spinner, or whatnot, is when you approach the water, you want to try to cast from shore first and then slowly make your way into the water, because you never know if there's any fish close to the bank or whatnot. You don't want to spook them right away by getting in the water quickly. The next important thing is where you're casting. So for starters, you never want to cast downstream. You always want to cast either across the stream or upstream. The reasoning for that is if I cast downstream and I reel towards me, it's going to create a lot more drag on the lure, which looks unnatural, versus if I cast it across, or usually they like to say at like 10 o'clock, which would be roughly here, cast this way. It's going to create a lot less drag, look a lot more natural, and you'll have a much better chance at catching a fish. I'll demonstrate a few ideal casts. It's not rocket science here, but this is how you should be casting in rivers or streams. All right, 10 degrees. So for 10 degrees, I usually swing like a baseball bat. Okay. For 12 degrees, I usually just chuck it right over my head. So can't really get this on video very well, but just like I'm throwing a big axe or something, and it goes like perfectly straight. So it's very simple. The biggest thing is just make sure you're not casting downstream. Another thing I want to explain is speed of retrieving or reeling in your line. So immediately as it hits the water, I wait about a second and then I just reel at a constant rate. You're not trying to do anything fancy, you're not trying to jig it or do any delays, or you're not trying to do anything like this. Spinners are really simple. You don't have to like try to do a lot of action with them. You just kind of keep the tip of the rod pointed down, wait like a second as it lands in the water, and just reel at a constant speed. You also don't want your lure to sink very low, so you don't want it on the bottom and you don't want it at the very top of the water. You want it in the strike zone, which is typically above the fish's head. So if you pretend there's a fish like sitting on the bottom of the stream, you don't want the fish to be looking up at the lure. All right, got a fish. Nice. Sweet. Just like that. It's that easy, guys. This looks like a brown trout. Before you touch the fish, trout have a slime covering. You want to wet your hands, okay? And now you can touch it. Oh, let me wet the other one. Just like that. So I'll just grab them like this. They do have some teeth, a very small amount. Well, not very sharp is what I wanted to say. You want to do this as quickly as possible. I mean, it's obvious that the quicker you can get the fish in the water, the better. You just kind of have to wiggle it a little bit. All right, if they're tricky, like this one, sometimes you just gotta get a tool. All right, we're out. Okay. All right, so brown trout, you can tell because it's brown. We're just gonna release him. You kind of hold him in the water. He's good. See that? He's gone. But yeah, having tools like the scissors or pliers really help. Just makes it easier. Okay, so after catching that brown trout, I just really wanted to emphasize like the main points of this video is like you could fish all day, but if you're not using the right stuff in the right location, you might just not get anything. And so it's really important to understand like what type of lure to use. In that case, I used the MEPS 2. So remember what I said, like anything that's above 6 to a foot, you should use a 2 or 3. That fish is probably 9 inches, probably rough estimate. You should then find an ideal location. So I showed you this is kind of like a pool. You have those rapids kind of going into a deeper area with some debris for the fish to hide. And then lastly, you need the right casting technique. And like you saw in that video, I was casting straight across or 10 o'clock. So I'm not casting downstream. So basically with those 3 things, that should guarantee you a very high chance to catch fish. That was literally like 5 casts, guys, or not even. Like this whole video has been more about like showing what type of baits to use, where to fish, more than actual fishing itself. So I was literally just instructing like how to cast, and I caught one. All right, guys, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. I basically just wanted to make this video to share some basic fishing tricks with spinners to catch trout. If you guys have your own tricks and stuff I have not covered in this video, please put them in the comments. I'd love to read them and share them in another video. But as always, thank you guys for watching. I hope these tricks have helped someone. Bye.